Welcome to the First Take UK podcast. No Stephen Edwards tonight, out with toothache. So we've got Mains as always on a Wednesday. First of all, Mains, how are you doing?
Not too bad. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm doing alright. I'm doing okay. I'm a bit disappointed in my co-host. I don't want to slag him off too much because he'll probably download this. But filling in for him tonight, though, one of Paul's good friends, one of my good friends, lead writer, ukendzone.com/fantasy, all manner of other random stuff as well. Mr. Neil Dutton, how are you, sir?
I'm excellent. 2013 continues to be a year of dreams coming true.
I believe so.
Here I am.
And you're joining us, essentially. I mean, you do it anyway, don't get me wrong, but the Ashes are tonight, so you're fired up for that, right?
Oh, I certainly am. I'm as fired up as I can be in a house where I have to be very, very quiet because there's a young child asleep. But no, that's still a lot of excitement.
So we're favoured, right, boys, for the Ashes? That's happening, right? This is in the bag.
Well, is it in the bag, Neil? I never like to. Yeah, I was going to say I never like to say in the bag when we play Australia, especially when you changed all the guys around. There's a better chance of winning.
That's true. All right, so
I heard someone say what we should do because Michael Clark said the other week that he knows what the England 11 will be at the toss when they say, okay, so what's the teams? Cook should just say, ask him, walk off.
I like that. That's a good idea. Right, tonight we're going to do a Roundtable NFL talk, deep talk, boys, into deep issues, because there's lots of them around at the moment. There truly is, and we'll still do pick'ems. We'll go through a lightning round at the end, probably just me and you, Mains, depending on Ash's stuff. I don't know. Neil's already done it with me tonight, and we can just direct them there, Neil. We have an advert for that as well. I want to kick off with essentially looking at Wes Welker and the overriding concussion issue, because it's a big thing. I've never really discussed it with either of you. And Wes Welker suffered a concussion last week, guys, and it was his 5th in the league. And I read an ESPN article, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, from a former linebacker whose name escapes me right now, who said essentially, if a player tells you he has 1 concussion, he has 2. If he's had 2, he's had 4, because they get dinged up so often, but they try and don't tell the trainer, or they try and get around the protocols. Plus, Wes Welker used to be a return man. I mean, when is enough in terms of concussions? Paul, I'll come to you first, because that's 5 now. And so if you go by that logic of the former linebacker, you're looking at 10, plus former return man who's just getting crushed over the middle all the time. That's a lot, right?
That is an awful lot of head injuries, and I think that's where we just need to, when's enough? I suppose for me, one head injury is far too many. These guys' brains work differently to anybody else in sports. I think it's almost like there's a gladiatorial aspect to it, that they just think that it's just a knock and I can get over it. And unfortunately now more and more you're seeing retired players suffering from a lot of issues related to these concussions, and it's something that I think children and parents now are looking at, but the players that are there now aren't, and maybe some of them need to be protected from themselves a little bit more.
Yeah, because I was thinking about Ryan Fitzpatrick when I read this, because I couldn't believe Welker had 5. I remember 2 at the Patriots, and he must have had 1 I can't remember. And Fitzpatrick basically is Ryan Fitzpatrick, Kevin Cobb even. My apologies. Looks like he may just retire from the game because he's had enough and he's got too many. And this guy is constantly over the middle. He's smaller than everyone on the field anyway. Neil, what about they have that E60 film, you may have seen it, which basically goes through a home of former NFL players, and it's just not a nice sight. I mean, all these players have iPads, team iPads. Surely that video should be locked on there. They should watch it often. And I understand Wes Welker's got a chance at a Super Bowl in Denver right now, but 5 is crazy to me, especially as a former return man as well. That sticks in my head because the amount of times you just get dinged and on the bottom of piles and stuff. When is enough, Neil?
Well, Maisie and I have discussed this quite recently, the issue of concussions. I've had a mild concussion myself because I have this problem. I can run quite quick, but I have no braking power, so I literally have to hit something to stop me. So a few years ago when I was playing 5-a-side, I ran into a wall, and 2 o'clock the next morning, my mother found me downstairs demanding to know who Charlie was. I have no recollection of it at all. It just seems that there's an awful lot. The NFL now it's a much shorter game off the field, and what I mean by that is you used to be able to. There used to be coaches who come in and have 5 year plans and whatnot. It's a win now league. So players have bought into that to such an extent that they're not really thinking about their health in 10, 15 years' time. They're all thinking about, oh, I'm okay now. I was a bit dizzy on Monday, but I'll be fine now. Not really worrying. It's like, as May said, it's a bit of a check to their masculinity to go out and say, oh, I can't play. I'm dizzy. Because it's still a very macho game. And so it's fine. It's absolutely ludicrous because we've talked about, Troy Aikman has, was it 3? So apparently, I think that was enough.
Yeah.
Kevin Cobb, as you said, basically had his head almost ripped off his body because he's been concussed that many times. If I had one serious concussion, I'm sorry, I'd call it a career. But that's just me.
The thing is with Wes Welker as well, I feel like, the manhood argument almost goes out the window with him because we know what he's like. He's always over the middle in a day and age where you just don't go over the middle. If I'm him, I either say to the coach and staff, look, we're making the playoffs, sit me for the rest of the games. Let's just not risk this. And then I say to myself, this is my run this year and I'm just not going to come back to the game. This is the best chance I'll ever have. I'm going to drop off in standard anyway, and it just isn't worth it. But it means that the point of the masculinity and, like Neil's saying, they're not forward thinkers. How do you combat that as a league then, if these guys aren't forward thinkers?
Well, this becomes the issue, and I know I've spoken to my mate Tony on this. What they did in rugby originally was that if you got a concussion, you were just out for 3 weeks. That was the end of it. There was no. You started to pass tests, but the minimum you could be out was for 3 weeks, and that was kind of the end of it. And it's that masculinity thing's an issue. We all remember the pictures, or I remember Twitter when Jay Cutler didn't come back out for the NFC Championship game. The Twitter exploded and basically questioned his manhood at that particular point, and none of the players ever want that type of issue questioned. So we'll do whatever they can to win. And as Dutton said, it's a win now league. And you speak to former players who didn't win the Super Bowl, and they would do anything to play in the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl. And whether that means it affects their long-term health, they really don't care.
I think Troy Aikman's a great one for Wes Welker to pick up the phone and speak to, because if anyone follows his stuff on the different telecasts he's on, he often takes days off. If he's scheduled to do things, he just won't be there, and they'll say he couldn't come in. And he readily admits that some mornings he wakes up and his mind just isn't working right. That's a scary thing. And again, to come back to 5, and me and Stephen first discussed this when it was Kevin Cobb. Surely the easiest thing to do is put in plan, like you said with the rugby. I know it's a short season, but you put in plan 1 concussion 3 weeks, 2 concussions 6 weeks, 3 concussions. We're not maybe not void your contract. You maybe have to take that on as a risk, but we can't just put it down to insurance and say, look, we can't have this in the league. It can't go on anymore. What do you reckon?
I suppose the question becomes, from my point of view, is where does the players' union stand on this? Do they stand on they want their players to be healthy, or is that a restriction of one of their players playing? And it'd be interesting to get Demora Smith's view on it, I think.
Yeah, I feel like with them representing the players as well, and it's such a get my money now league, like Neil mentioned. I feel like most of the players would just be down the line what Neil said, well, you know what, that's just a risk, it's just playing football. We hear that all the time they're just playing football. They knew what they were getting into, which is a line that I hate. You didn't know you were getting into 5 head injuries, and probably by the 4th one, you're like, well, I've had now. So what more can really go wrong from the 4th to the 5th? But, I don't want to sound harsh and brutal or anything, but to me, Neil, this Welker one sounds like 20 years' time we're going to be seeing documentaries about how great a player Wes Welker was, and look where he is now.
Yeah, the frightening thing would be is we don't really want to be watching the football life of Wes Welker of, well, he had a good career, but then this happened. We don't want to see that. No, we don't. Let's be honest, we don't want to see that of any player. No. But when you see someone who was, such an icon of the game, Junior Seau, but according to the injury report, he was never listed as suffering a concussion. Well, for God's sake, he must have had some head injury then that literally just walked off and just sat there quietly to himself. No coaches, no trainers have gone over and said, Junior, you okay there? And I mean, obviously, as you say now, the game, it's different now because there's more focus on the concussion. It was just on a special team. It was on the return game. Sorry, it was on the kickoff return on Sunday for the Ravens, and the Chicago fella tackled him. I think there was a slight head contact, and he was gone. He was out of it. He was staggering. He dazed. He had to sit down. He get helping him off. Just to see that happen to one person was frightening. If Welker's had that 5 times, and that's been divulged 5 times, so we know it's at least 5. The Troy Aikman thing, it would frighten me to death to wake up in the morning and forget things, because I pride myself, it's amazing, I like to think I know everything. I like to think that I remember everything. If I woke up and all of a sudden there were gaps, I didn't realise where I was, what I was supposed to do, that would scare me more than, I can go out and win the Super Bowl, because, let's be honest, they get paid an awful lot of money during the season. If we take this from a purely business point of view, once they get into the playoffs, their wages come down from massive amounts to 18,000, 26,000 a game or something.
Yeah.
So winning the Super Bowl is not a huge financial incentive. They make their money in their career during the season. Well, sign one contract, make your money. But if you start getting concussions, I think you have to start. They're not going to smash it back. Once you've got guaranteed money, you just have a few concussions and then say, yeah, it's not for me. I mean, Kevin Cobb's his family are never going to go hungry, are they? Let's be honest.
And this is the thing, I'm not banging on Wes Welker for people listening. I'm using him as like a case study because it's the most recent one, and I read the article saying it shocked me with the 5, and then rereading the ESPN article saying like it's basically double because they don't divulge or they won't tell the trainer. And if I'm Welker, I mean, it's a great point about the money. The guy already has the reputation where if he wanted to make money anyway, he'd get it. Like, it's not even in question. If he just wanted a $3 million contract for 1 year, he could get it off any team. And he's got paid this massive deal, and he got big money at New England as well. I'd understand if it's an undrafted rookie who's been in the league for about 6 years, bounced around teams, constantly getting waived, and he's had 5 during training camp and different things in preseason, and he wants to keep giving it a go to try and make some money. But when you've been at that superstar status and Mount Rushmore of slot receivers, the incentive of a Super Bowl to, like the Troy Aikman thing, being on an E60, being on the football life, just general being able to play with your kids you can't do some days because your head's all over the place, just doesn't seem... I don't know what the risk to reward is, really. I mean, this is something else I wanted to talk about then, Mains. With you guys especially, having kids, something that's coming out of all this thing is the drop in participation in Pop Warner football, in Pee Wee football. It's had a massive decline in the last 12 months. It's quite scary for people at the top of the NFL, the decline in football participation in the major regions. So, simply, would you let your children play football?
I personally would have major reservations due to that kind of issue, especially at an early age. Playing 9, 10, 11, 12. And I think that's got to be a major concern. I don't know about what Dutton thinks.
Well, for me, the issue I would have is, and this is another topic, I've discussed this in the past, with my theory of why college coaches don't succeed in the NFL. At the ages 9, 10, 11, most kids are the same size, the same height, maybe the same weight. There's going to be a few bigger ones. So when you have situations where kids are tackling kids, it's quite an equal force going against each other. Once you come into the league, and we saw this during the last weekend, where you have someone like Navarro Bowman hitting a 6-foot quarterback, and he's getting the flag for it and getting the personal foul. Once it opens it up, it's a much more open league, and there's different shapes, different sizes, then it becomes a bit more of a concern. But I mean, as Mainsley has a son, so I have a daughter, so no, not a chance in hell let her play football.
See, this is the interesting thing, because I coach youth football over here at Chester Romans, and we play 5-on-5, and I always get the parents come up beforehand asking me, how safe is this game, because they see the NFL, and I'm like, well, it's nothing like that, trust me, it's not that violent. And then we had a high school coach come over from Chicago, and he was just touring the country, helping out with the coaching from the NFL UK people sending him down, and he couldn't believe how more of there's like a protocol around injuries and stuff. He was saying like he's been to games where at the high school level a guy gets absolutely paralyzed and dinged out of a game, and they just like prop him up against a tree or the sideboard and say, right, we'll sort you out at the end of the game, we might take you to A&E. So all over it seems like a terrible fit. And how much responsibility should the league take as the NFL? Is it really their responsibility to try and help sort out high school football? Is that like a future investment of guys that will eventually be in your league?
I think they've got to, if they want to keep the game as strong and powerful, as successful as it is, they've got to take ownership of the whole levels of it. So if that kind of situation's occurring, then less kids are going to play high school football, which means less are going to play college, which means less are going to be in the NFL. The less they have, the lower the standard. And this is the kind of thing they really need to be careful of and deal with. So I know the Football Association in the UK is not exactly the best example, but at least they attempt to try and get it from grassroots above, whereas the NFL and actually most of the professional sports seem to wipe their hands of it until it gets to when they need to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think a massive part of it as well that we forget at times, almost lucky from the FA's point of view, if the leader of the FA has a stance on something, he can just do it. Like, he's in charge, he's the chairman, he has his board and stuff. It's usually his friends, and they can get it done, and he goes down his own ideology. When you're a commissioner, you're responsible to the owners employ you. So all the billionaires, I'm not sure that Stan Kroenke is massively worried about a kid in Arizona playing football. So that's the issue. If I'm Roger Goodell, though, and this is almost like a branding point of thing as well, which is what Colin Cowherd means, you'll know. He always talks about how the NFL does these things and it's targeting young women now because they're going to have the babies and all that. That's the philosophy. I feel like they should just set up their own, not like a breakaway high school league, but say this is a high school league we're setting up nationwide. You have to follow these rules, a certain amount of, like, I don't know, medics, all this different kind of stuff. We'll supply all this gear, grants to the schools that want to get involved for certain, good practice wear, and then try and get as many schools as possible to join into that. And then just try and build your own high school league and then basically try and take over high school football would probably be the way they'd have to go about it.
I think you're right. As you said, the major issue becomes is how do you get Stan Kroenke and Jerry Jones and Dan Snyder and Robert Kraft to sign up to giving literally millions of dollars of the money that they've quote unquote earned to something that they won't see a tangible benefit of for a while.
This is the issue, Neil. What can they realistically do though? Because the issue with the owners, I mean, how do they really get involved in it? I think it's like it's really easy to have the ideological standpoint, and I'm sure Roger Goodell does. And he's doing the Play 60, I think it is, where he takes former NFL players and they do their summer camps, and they do it all year round now, I think. But then to actually get in there properly and really help the thing out, it's just basically an impossible task, right?
It is impossible. I mean, as you say, Roger Goodell is beholden to these 32 millionaires, billionaires, of course, who own the teams. And the one thing about sport, and this is always the argument, sport, ultimately, it's a business. The one thing that big sports like the NFL, or like soccer and cricket as well, you'll never run out of players. Even if the Wes Welkers and these people have said, can't play anymore, it's too dangerous, I've had enough, I'm sorry, you'll find 10,000 people at least in Denver who'll do Wes Welker's job for a portion of the salary. So the owners are just thinking, no, we'll always find people who can play this game. So, it's tragic, of course, what happens to them after they leave the game. That's very, very sad. Unfortunately, we're not paying their wages then, so ultimately, we don't care.
So would you worry about the dilution of talent, or is that too much of a forward-thinking thing for guys like Dan Snyder, who still have a name of Redskins on their team to think about? Or does it become negligible? Because if the talent pool dilutes so much, everyone's at the same talent level again?
Well, it's one of those. I mean, is it parity, or is it... Is it parity or is it mediocrity? I mean, ultimately, there's still going to be a team at the end of the season who wins the Super Bowl. Whether no one's going to, it doesn't say in the book, it was an awful season, but they won the Super Bowl. It just says they won the Super Bowl, and ultimately, that's what the owners want.
All right, guys, I want to talk about the state of the league as a whole, then, and bring it back away from such dark discussions, and let's try and progress this league after a quick word from our sponsors.
Wish you could walk out on your fantasy team. FanDuel packs the thrill of a whole season into just 1 week. Play in 1 week fantasy football leagues for real money with immediate cash payouts. The money is real, and with no season-long commitment, you only play when you want. FanDuel.com, where every week is a new season.
Welcome back, First State UK podcast special on a Wednesday night. No Stephen Edwards, we got Dutton and we have Mains in with us, Mains and Dutton, where they do discuss NFL topics on UKEndzone.com. And we're doing a roundtable tonight, some of the big issues. I want to talk about the standard of the league right now, because you guys have been watching this game probably longer than me. I've been watching it for as long as I knew the thing existed. But you're still, the year's age. That's where I'm going with this thing, guys. How good is this league right now, talent-wise, compared to past eras? Sorry, I'll start with you first, Mains.
It's a very good question. I suppose with the advent of free agency, I remember I watched the NFL before free agency. I'm not that old, but that makes me sound tremendously old. And I think back then it was a lot easier to get a quote-unquote super team.
Yeah.
And where it is now, although I look at, say, teams like, say, Washington, who haven't got a defense, or the Patriots, who say they can't get any wide receivers, and then I think, well, how come Carolina have got all these defensive players, and how come the Denver Broncos seem to be able to pick all these wide receivers? I just think that the way the game has evolved means that the positions where the talent base is have changed, and that may think that the way you used to watch football is different, and that therefore you think that the standards may have slipped, when actually they may just become a little bit different.
Yeah, and I also look at the top end of the league, and I've been trying to compare this in the last few weeks because I'm writing some articles about it for the off-season, getting ready for it. The top end of the league compared to years past, I can't remember there being a era of time like now where the main skill positions, particularly on offense, which gets all the notoriety, where all the top guys at that position have been involved in best of all time talk right now. So Peterson, Brady, Manning, Rodgers, Calvin Johnson. Is that a product, Neil, of this being an offensive league now, or is that a product of these guys are just so damn good, moving to any era, and we're just so fortunate to have guys at the skill positions being as dominant and as good as they are?
I think it's definitely a situation that the league now, your poster boys are all quarterbacks, all wide receivers. That's obviously the change in the game. The rules regarding being able to jam receivers and whatnot, they've all changed. So it is a passer league. We all know this. Going back to myself, I've only been watching it nearly about 15 years, and I still remember the days when the two best secondaries I saw, because they were hard, they were physical. It was the Philadelphia Eagles of the early 2000s and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I'm pretty sure that those two teams, if those secondaries played now, then they couldn't keep them all together because they keep getting fined, suspended and whatnot because they were physical. So you had to come and play defensively as well. Whereas now it's a bit jading to me then to see, it's another 400-yard passing game or another 5,000-yard season. Donovan McNabb for the Eagles was the greatest Eagles quarterback of all time. I'll defend that for anyone. Never had a 4,000-yard passing season, but I was fine with it because he was throwing 20 touchdowns, wasn't turning the ball over, and we ran the ball occasionally. Whereas now it's almost like if your quarterback doesn't throw for 5,000 yards or 4.5 or you're not going to be successful. And some of the defensive, it's come down obviously the CBA and not being able to practice and whatnot. The standard of tackling at the league,
it's atrocious.
It's pathetic from what it was 10 years ago. No one tackles anymore. They just want to try and pop the ball out.
And something that I found, I spoke to Ted yesterday, listeners, Ted Sundquist, former NFL general manager, and he was saying that when he first began, he was a player personnel guy, and he was sent to college interviews. And the guys that he was interviewing, he'd asked them what their goal was for that season, just in their career at college at the time. It was always underclassmen he got to speak to first. And they'd always say, win the national title. I want to win my conference championship, win my national title. Now, everything is geared from the day they step foot on a campus, the freshman year, is to get to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. Everything now is geared to people getting to the NFL. I think that completely changes the talent pool because Ted is adamant that there's guys who could have played dominant football in the NFL 20 or so years ago. They just opted not to. They'd play great college ball, they'd have their degree, and they'd go off and become great businessmen. So with everything being so geared and it being the be-all and end-all league now, and we see all the basketball players converted to tight ends. Neil, I don't know if you've heard this, but some former basketball players who are average become elite tight ends. Is it a broader pool, Mains? I know we talked about concussions, but just in the last couple of years, that's built to where the league is at this point. The more people wanting to play with the money and everything.
I think now with the money that's involved, whereas before there may have been some players in college who were happy to be college players. I think now the publicity and the notoriety of playing in the NFL and even playing in a big college places just lends itself to know more about it and more people be aware of it. I mean, if you go on to say ESPN now, I think there's a story that 2 Alabama recruits have changed their minds and are now going to USC and Auburn. You know, was that a story?
No.
5 years ago, 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? No one would have even known, apart from the local press and whatever the Alabama newspaper is, and the Los Angeles Times would have been the 2 people who reported the USC one, but it would have been in the bottom right hand corner of the Los Angeles Times. Okay, to be fair, in Alabama it would have been the front page news because that's how Alabama works. But I just think that the level of coverage, because of places like ESPN and Fox Sports in America, it's just lent itself to be you're famous before you're famous. So like if you take it quickly to basketball, like that Jabari Parker, for example, or Wiggins, whichever one, everybody already knows that they're NBA players. Do you know what I mean? And they knew they were NBA players 3 years ago because Chad Ford told them that the 2014 draft was going to be the best draft in 10 years. Do you know, it's like, when did you start talking about Teddy Bridgewater being one of the top picks in the draft? Jadeveon Clowney, how long has Jadeveon Clowney been a top 3 pick? It's like 2 years. That never used to happen. You never used to know who was going to be the best players until the year they were coming out, and you didn't know they were coming out until the last possible moment. But now you just assume they're going to come out as quickly as possible. So it's always more a story. Oh, he stayed in school rather than he left.
Yeah, and I also think that really just jogged my memory, because right now on ESPN.com, they're running a story of the top junior high school players. So, because we're getting close to signing day for the top high school seniors, they're now talking about junior players in high school. And that to me speaks to ESPN saying the brand that sells at the moment, the biggest seller in the world probably, is the NFL, the Premier League and the NFL. So if we hype these guys up at juniors in college, they'll go to college football. They'll be on college football Saturday for ESPN. Then we get them for the NFL on Sunday. Do you think organisations really think like that, other than those guys turn into maybe other sports, baseball, basketball, and so they try and hype them at that young age, and it sort of builds into them being college stars and NFL stars? Neil, what do you reckon?
I think it does, because as we say, the NFL, the appeal, as it were, of the NFL compared to a lot of the other sports is it's such a short season. But it's a 365 day a year sport. But the season itself is only 16 games, 17 weeks with 16 games. So it's the lesser there is of something, the more valuable it becomes. The analogy I always use is, if there was a bit left on Earth, rabbit crap would be worth more than diamonds. And so if you have something like that, there was a phrase that obviously Mainsy and another of our friends always, they know a lot more about the NFL than I do, and a phrase they always talked about whenever someone was coming out of the draft was, he's pro-ready, he plays in a pro offense. So whereas now it just seems that it's, as you say, now these guys have been told they're pro-ready, 3-4 years before they've ever even worn their first NFL team shirt. It is all about. Say the Premier League is it's weird to compare to the NFL, because the Premier League is not really now an English product. It just happens to be based in England. Whereas the NFL, it's still they're all Americans in there, so it's their game still. And anyone who's going to come into it, they don't want Johnny come lately from some Division 2 school, who's playing against. Hicks every day. They don't want him. They don't want him to be there. It's a nice story, but they want the kid who's racked up every record in his high school and every college. They want the anticipation of knowing that in 2 years maybe we'll stink enough we can get him. That's the idea, where it's just like, okay, let's look at the draft. Who we're going to get now? It's a lot more. It's having some degree of forward thinking for fans, and because let's say if that's the product, because you have to sell your fan base that we may stink now, but give us 3 years. It's not, because in the Premier League, as you say, Sheffield Wednesday got relegated in the Premier League in 2000. We ain't coming back. And there's no point to Sheffield Wednesday going out of the way to trying to sell to their fans. We'll be there in 2 years. You won't, because we're not stupid. But
I think
that's delusion because of past free agency.
Go on, Paul.
Neil's definitely hit the nail on the head on that. Is that where the American sports have a bonus really, is that they can sell you on being rubbish.
Yeah.
So the NBA is a prime example this year. There's a load of fan bases who are actually secretly happy that they're getting beat. Like Bill Simmons wrote after the Celtics went 0-4 the first few games, didn't he? But he was made up that they were going 0-4 because they were trying really hard, but they were getting beat. So they were filling in all the purposes that it showed that the coach. It showed that Brad Stevens, who was the new coach, could actually coach. But they also had no talent, and they were going to get more talent with all these draft picks. He's now thinking, oh, look, the Nets are rubbish, so we're going to get the Nets picks as well. It's like if I'm St. Louis, I'm praying Washington lose every week, because not only have we got our draft pick, which is going to be high, but then we're also going to get Washington's draft pick.
It's pretty mad. I also think that with the guys coming to the sport, and it's something I found out literally in the last 24 hours, is the parasite of agents at an early age is phenomenal in America. Because guys can have an agent and they're allowed to call it a consultant when they between going from high school to college. Then they can't speak to them anymore until obviously they go in and get ready for the draft. And I offered to do a evaluation for a player coming out of high school right now who's just committed to Stanford, because I was trying to perfect doing different scout things and all that sort of jazz. And he retweeted it, and within about 2 seconds, I had about 3 emails from agents saying, will you take a look at our prospect and do all this? So the hype machine is both ways from the companies, and the prospects know that to get to the NFL, you've got to try and figure out a good story. You've got to try and get the hype machine going, because, I mean, I'm not cynical, but Manti Te'o didn't really drum down too much of what was going on with him pre-draft. He really didn't. He did like one interview, and they didn't really stop anything coming out, because if you're being talked about, you're going to get drafted and you're going to get into the NFL. It's the same thing with Johnny Manziel. He's going to get so hyped up by his own camp leading into the draft, because if you talked about, you get picked, and we see it all the time, and you're then in the league.
Well, I mean, I know we ask this all the time, Ollie, but Tim Tebow was the only person he spoke about the whole draft. Mm-hmm. Didn't speak about anybody else. That's all he spoke about, and that's going to be Manziel this year. Yeah. Good or not, talented or not, doesn't really make any difference. All people want to know is, where is Johnny Manziel going to be? That's all they're going to ask Todd McShay, and it's all they're going to ask Mel Kiper on ESPN, and they're going to ask Mayock, the same on the NFL Network. Who's going to pick Johnny Manziel? And
Tebow got drafted off hype as well. He's the prime example of getting drafted off hype. Talent was there, obviously, but he was no way near a bottom of the first round player. They picked him because all the hype. Let's give it a shot. It could work out. It'd be incredible. We sell all loads of jerseys. We know what's happening with that. And the Patriots were the team that were ready to take him after the Broncos. And they thought maybe they could snag him in the second round, and they were thinking about taking him in the third. So it is just a pure hype game getting into the National Football League.
The only thing worse than people talking behind your back is when they're not talking about you at all.
You're dropping so many pearls of wisdom, Neil. I feel like we have to bring them all the time.
I've been on a long time now. They start coming out.
With the NFL draft, though, and I obviously love it. It's like my favourite time of year, talking about college prospects and what have you. And I always think, because finding out about all these agents getting involved in the hype that they grind up for their prospects, even if it's just through ringing teams incessantly every day to find out where they're placed in their board, is there too much pressure on the guys coming into the draft, or are they putting the pressure on themselves by hype and everything, go into all these different agency training camps to get drafted means?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think they do put pressure on themselves. It's like Cam Newton. If we use a first round pick, first round in the draft, Cam Newton was picked number 1 overall, and at the end of last year, people were questioning Cam Newton. That was like his second year in the NFL. Those exact same questions are going to happen of Robert Griffin III. They're actually happening now. Is he a leader? Can he do this? Can he do that? Those questions are maybe perfectly valid, but he's been in the league 1 year. He's played 25 games. Cam Newton had played 30 games, and people were questioning, leadership and all that. And you're thinking, he only played 1 year in college for Auburn. It's not like this guy had spent 4 years at Auburn, and then this was his 5th year in the league, and we didn't know whether he was right, whether he was whether he was right or not for the NFL. 2 years, and people are questioning whether he's any good. It takes time for these things to mature. It takes time for teams to mature. It takes time for teams to take the mould of a quarterback. And you look at the Carolina Panthers this year, and due to circumstances and whatever, they now look like Cam Newton's team, and are playing like Cam Newton's team, and are winning like Cam Newton's team, even if that means you have to body slam Rob Gronkowski in the final play of a game.
And I thought we could get through this podcast without mentioning that pass interference call. God damn it. I screwed this up so well.
It was holding, it wasn't passing.
It was wrestling is what it was.
It was wrestling, it was definitely wrestling.
It was horrendous. Cam's the perfect case study, by the way, because I remember just laughing reading Charlotte Observer articles questioning him as a winner and a leader. This is a guy who won a national title in Florida, went to junior college, won a national title, came back to Auburn, won a national title, and second year in the league, after going first overall in the draft, doesn't know how to win. It's phenomenal.
Well, this is the question with all of the quarterbacks. To get to a big college, you've got to know how to win. You probably won a state title, or you've got to a certain level. It's like even Robert Griffin. He was winning lots of games with Baylor, and I know this season Baylor are amazing, but that's not something that usually happens. It's like Andrew Luck was brilliant for Stanford. Stanford isn't like Alabama. Do you know what I mean? These are places where Cam Newton won at Auburn. Now, again, that's not Alabama. They look at the national title records between the two places. They're not the same. Do you know what I mean? They're definitely a little brother to Alabama.
Oh yeah, and
that's where people. You have these quarterbacks who they win all these national titles and they win the state titles or not. Is there not a worry that the first time these kids have to learn how to lose is in the professional game?
This is the questions I was having with Cam, and this is what I tried to tell people for a year last year. Is I was saying, why do you think he's moaning? The guy's only ever won. So he wins 3 national titles in different colleges. Okay, he was a backup in the first one, fair enough, but he's still in a winning locker room, should we say, winning environment. And then he goes number 1 overall in the draft. Everyone telling him how good he's going to be, outside of Mike Mayock, who, by the way, trumped up Blaine Gabbert to go first overall in that draft. Just like to remind people of that every now and then. So when he's losing games 9 in a row, he's obviously thinking, well, I'm not the problem. So what do people expect from him? And he's learned how to deal with it, and he comes out this year and balls like crazy, wins a load of games. So you bang on the nail, Neil. And it's just this crap culture of guys not being allowed to rest. The one thing we heard about Geno Smith is, well, he's got all the tools, but I don't think he's quite ready yet. Yeah, he gets the job, and then we act like he should be ready. That makes no sense. It's bizarre.
But this is it. That Geno Smith's a good example. Read the reports. People are like, yeah, he could be an NFL quarterback, but he's probably not ready to play this year. He gets drafted by the Jets, who have no quarterback. He's automatically going to start for them, and then people wonder when he throws a load of interceptions why that's happening. It doesn't, it's like that. I obviously I'm going to dip back to Washington. It's like, we won a load of games last year, but for me there was a lot of smoke and mirrors involved. There's a team that hasn't got a lot of talent on it. Didn't have really a lot of talent on it this year, regardless of what people will say. We won games due to scheme and by Robert Griffin playing well. Robert Griffin gets injured, we're still we're missing £18 million, $18 million off a cap. It's a lot of money. Then you start losing, and as you said, Roberts never lost before, so kind of doesn't really want to question himself. Although his play in the games hasn't been very good at times, and people start looking at him like, well, you're supposed to take all the blame for this. When Aaron Rodgers loses, Aaron Rodgers takes responsibility, and you're like, yeah, but Aaron Rodgers stopped behind Brett Favre for 4 years. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? There's kind of a completely different mindset from Aaron Rodgers to Robert Griffin. They're not the same person. Robert Griffin's definitely more in the Cam Newton camp than he is in the Aaron Rodgers camp.
Yeah, and I feel really sorry for RG3 right now because I've got on his back. But when I look at it compared to Cam, so the guy goes to Baylor. He's also a world-class sprinter. Basically, USA Athletics throw all sorts of endorsement deals at him to go and become a US athlete and win Olympic gold medals. He is just phenomenal at Baylor. Gets told he could be a once-in-a-generation player, should maybe be taken number 1 overall instead of the guy who everyone else thought was the once-in-a-generation guy. Wins the Heisman Trophy. It starts his rookie season okay, but the team falls back. He then picks his game up and he takes the team on a crazy run into the playoffs. So the guy's an experienced losing. It's another one of them, and we're so quick to get on their backs. I understand it's the business for those guys. I get that. But it's bizarre to look at. Even just the common fans just are like, well, this guy should be good now because we've been told he's going to be so good. He should be good. He's pro-ready. Well, no, because it's a complete different system. You go from playing with 100 other guys to playing with 52 NFL athletes, and it's completely different.
We've discussed this before, Ollie. When people say, "Oh, Alabama have beat Jacksonville,"
oh God,
no, he wouldn't, because Alabama have got 10 pros and Jacksonville have got 53. Robert Griffin, regardless of which defense he's playing against, has never came up against defenses with that much talent on them, ever.
Or in the coaching room as well. These guys are so much more intelligent, and some college coaches are sensational and could coach in the pros, no doubt, but all the other support staff that build up the whole NFL back room, they're all NFL talent coaches. That's why they're there. There's only 32 head coaching jobs in the world of that, and people don't often take that into account. There's so many college jobs where you get a chance to over and over again prove yourself. There's only 32 in the NFL. I want to talk then about those young quarterbacks, because your friend Dave Damashek, Neil, always says that they only hand out 1 Lombardi a year, which is sensational. It's a great quote because people often forget it when they go, oh, Andrew Luck's going to get 3 or 4. Then RG3 will get his, Kaepernick will get his, Brady will get 1 more, so will Manning and Roethlisberger. Well, they only give out 1 a year. So it brings it back to basics. We're all in agreement, right, that right now we take Andrew Luck, right? If we're starting a team, we're taking Andrew Luck. So outside of Luck, and even him, how many do each of them get, Neil? In terms of, okay, let's go Kaepernick, Newton, or just say which ones do get 1, which ones don't, or is it too hard to call with intangibles in the playoffs?
I think it's too hard to say. From taking it in a vacuum, as we say, it'd be nice to, in 5-10 years, we can look at this group of quarterbacks and say that they've shared the last 10 Super Bowls between them. But the NFL being the league it is, there'll always be another team that'll have a good year, they could sneak in, and they could take it with an ageing veteran. The people, as we look now, the people who are probably going to be in the hunt consistently, because of the way the teams are, is Luck, because there's just something about him that makes a team that shouldn't be as good as they are. It shouldn't be that good. There's something about him that raises them up to a level. Seattle, they're not going away. Wilson's only going to get better. Eventually he's going to get paid, but obviously for CBA reasons he can't now. Kaepernick, I worry about, because he just doesn't come across as, it's that leader presence. For me, he looks like he'd be happy just being the quarterback, but he doesn't realise that being the quarterback means you are the face and leader of that franchise to an extent. I mean, obviously, I don't want to be biased as well, but you say RG3 is obviously a talent. If he can get back to somewhere near what he did last year, and many will agree, he's not been the same QB this year for various reasons. But we've shown there's other second-year quarterbacks who can come in, and all of a sudden they've done something that everyone in the league stands up to. That was incredible. I'm not saying Nick Foles is the answer in Philadelphia, but the guy threw 7 touchdowns in a game. Bad quarterbacks don't do that. But again, it's a question of, is he the quarterback of the future for the Philadelphia Eagles? Because if he is, the Eagles have got a good chance of getting back to relevancy, because this is the longest I've been without the playoffs since I've been watching the NFL. I honestly don't know how Mainzy survived. It's killed me.
I've done well out of it, by the way, boys. I've only had a few Super Bowls. Don't worry about it.
It's fine. You get used to it after a while. You just become numb to it. It means the ups are better. So last season was amazing. This year, I actually despise this team. So the one thing I'd say is, and I think that it doesn't really get talked about enough, is that the reason those teams are good at the moment is because they don't pay their quarterbacks a lot of money.
Yeah.
So Carolina was I believe the first year of the new cap. So like Cam's gotten like $3 million a year. You know, Russell Wilson's getting less than $1 million. I'm sure Kaepernick the same. Griffin, look, they're not getting a lot of money. So it sounds really silly, but their window, when they can have a lot of talent around them, gets smaller and smaller. So it should be really a good thing to say what a job that the likes of the New England Patriots are doing, or the likes that Indianapolis did when they had Peyton. To consistently get there, you've got to have like literally Hall of Fame, best quarterbacks ever discussion, because your talent dwindles because you have to give Peyton Manning or Tom Brady $100 million. And that is the question now, say for teams like Pittsburgh and Chicago, is, I know Cutler's contract runs out before Roethlisberger, but do you want to give them another massive contract when you look at the team, especially in Pittsburgh, and you think we're lacking talent around the field? Do we want to give Ben another massive deal and not spend it somewhere else?
I think that's a great point, and it brings me to a point about Peyton Manning, which I've been making with Stephen for ages. And I bash Peyton Manning at times. It's only to do with the playoffs. I respect that. Why has he not decided that he's going to take a vet minimum contract and surround himself with stupid amount of talent to win Super Bowls? If that's what he's all about, and he has all like the State Farm commercials and all those different commercials and stuff, in the same way that Coward spoke about Kobe Bryant the other day, which is an idea I think he stole from me, mains. Take the vet minimum or near it, or at least drop the amount of money you have, and allow the teams to go and spend it elsewhere. Why do guys not do that more when they're comfortable and they're all about winning? Is it an ego thing? Is it I want to be paid as one of the best in the world?
See, I think it sounds ridiculous. I think it's got nothing to do with them whatsoever. I think it's a players' union thing. I don't think the players' union want the best players to be on make a minimum salary, because then it gives the owners a get out of jail free card. I think the players' union want Peyton Manning to be the highest paid player in the NFL. They want Tom Brady to be the highest paid player in the NFL. When it comes around, they want Andrew Luck to be the highest paid player in the NFL. They don't want Peyton Manning to restructure. It's like they don't want Kobe Bryant to be amnestied and taken out of his deal and then take the minimum. That's not what they want to do. They want the owner to suffer for having the talent. You don't want them to. You don't want them to take a salary so they can have better players. They want Peyton Manning to be earning $100 million.
What do you reckon, Dutton?
I would have to agree. It's again, it's part of this, the way the league wants to attract itself to people. You know, to the next generation of all these college kids who still want to come in. It looks bad if they're saying, look, our best players only earn this. And when you throw it up against what baseball players can earn, because obviously, of course, baseball contracts are fully guaranteed, NFL money isn't. When you have something like that, it's still something. I mean, we had, was it like a 6-week span where there were 3 quarterbacks who all of a sudden had earned the most money at that position this off-season. Of the 3 quarterbacks who made this money, the $100 million contracts, if you're building a franchise from today, deep down, how many of those 3 would you want? And I'd have to argue none of them, but it looks good for everyone else. That that's liking it, and I'll go with Maines. It's probably if Manning, because I know Tom Brady has on occasion has not got the biggest contract he could get because he wanted the money to be shared around to do that. But is Tom Brady earning a pittance? No, but he's the second earner in that family, so he can afford it.
Yeah, that's true, because Brady shed like 12 million this offseason, I think, specifically to get Welker. Then they screwed him over and didn't get Welker, which is quite funny. Like, I'm not sure if Kraft gave that money back to him, actually. We should dig that up. But I've not even ever thought of that, which is probably stupid on my part, means. Of course, the NFLPA is trying to sell this to guys coming into the league, saying, look, what you can do if you work hard, you stay in this league for years. They don't want one of the best players of all time to be earning like $500,000 a year, non-guaranteed, just so that you can try and win a Super Bowl. Because the guy will just say, right, I'm going to go and play basketball, and then stupid amounts of money.
Exactly. The classic example is that when A-Rod was in Texas and he nearly signed for Boston, he would have took a pay cut and was willing to take the pay cut to play for Boston, and the players' union basically vetoed it and said it wasn't allowed, and they refused to let it happen. And I think that would happen in the NFL, that if Peyton Manning signed and said, I'm just going to take the minimum so we can go and sign, 4 free agents or whatever, I just don't think that Demora Smith would allow it.
All right, guys, I want to talk about the future of the NFL in a minute. We've got one more advert. You're going to love this one, Neil, because this is our good friend Tom Moore.
Hi, this is London calling. Well, not quite London, actually, a little bit further north. Look, if you want to listen to an NFL podcast from a British perspective, then why don't you give the UK Endzone football programme a try? You can find it at www.ukendzone.com/podcast, or you can search for it on iTunes. We cover all the latest NFL news with some added nonsense in British accents. Give it a try.
The internet's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Welcome back, First Take UK podcast. Neil Dutton, Paul Mainwaring, and we're discussing the NFL as a roundtable, some of the big issues. I want to talk about the future, and I've been making this comparison now for about a year. Does it seem to anyone else, and this is probably more of a UK-based audience thing, analogy, is the last days of Roger Goodell in office, because eventually they'll come to an end, does it remind you of Tony Blair just doing anything to get a legacy plan in there, possibly being London? And where do you think it's going? I'll start with you, Neil. And what do you think the legacy will ultimately be at this moment in time?
Well, the legacy, historians will always, look back and see what someone tried to do. I mean, in cases like with Tony Blair, they'll look back and say, well, no, he did do this. Obviously, then sourly, they can always pick up examples where it went wrong. Goodell's biggest legacy is going to be he put games in other countries, maybe a franchise, maybe not. He basically went out of his way to try and make the game, which, is a double-edged sword, because the only way you make the NFL truly safe is you don't play it. But he tried to do that. It's hard to say, because I've taken, when I first started watching, I was just all about watching, but the obsessive personality disorder I suffer from, I have to know everything about something. So as I read more and more into it, I pretty much missed out Paul Tagliabue and just got Goodell. Goodell's really the first commissioner I've been with the whole way through. And the game has changed, it has grown. And it's weird, because you think, when I started watching real NFL Europe, and that went, so you're thinking, well, that's going to diminish the game a bit because you've taken an avenue away. But if anything, it's made those 16 weeks, those 17 weeks, those 16 games more valuable, because as I say again, it's created the impression of scarcity, which has made them more valuable. So more people are going to want to watch games. We had one game in London, now we've got 2, now we're going to go to 3. Will we go more? I would say no, because I'm personally anti-franchise in this country. It's the National Football League, not the International Football League. But 2 or 3 games a year, yeah, that's great. We can have that. But any more, I think you run the risk of you'll milk this cash cow, personally.
And there's a great point about the franchise. I discuss it all the time. I actually read this sensational article about it on thefootballeducator.com. It was called The London Franchise, A Great Enigma. I don't know who wrote it, but it made some great points. Mains, what do you reckon about the legacy right now then, and where he's taking the league?
Well, it depends, I suppose, which way you look at it. From a business point of view, if you're the owners, you probably love Roger Goodell because he's done a lot of things to help you make more money. I think he's absolutely despised by the players for a multitude of different reasons, mainly because they see he's trying to totally change the way the game is played. As Neil said, he's trying to make it safer, but they just see it as interfering almost. And even when you listen to former players talk about. I mean, the classic one this week is Ray Lewis saying he's going to pay half of Ahmad Brooks's fine for his tackle on Drew Brees on Sunday. The players flip out because he's trying to make the game safer. He's trying to change the game, and they don't like that. However, I'm sure Jerry loves the TV deals that have been signed, and the fact that they're selling out, Wembley 2-3 times a year. These are good things for him. I think a new TV deal's coming up in a couple of years. They're going to make absolute shed loads of cash. So I think, from a journalistic point of view, people will look back not very well on the Goodell era, but from an owner point of view, they'll love him.
Yeah, and I feel like there's going to be a divide between different portions of the population. So I feel like American fans are really not going to like him because changing the game. Also, I like what you say about the players hate him and stuff. I feel like there's going to be a massive divide between them between defensive players and offensive players. Offensive players are going to be like, thank God for this guy who just, heightened my life expectancy from playing this game. Defensive players will have a completely different take. But international fans, I don't think can do anything but like him for bringing the game over, for trying to breach the gap between America and the game that we love. It's an interesting one. So, what is the biggest thing on his plate? Because he clearly wants to put a team in London. It's not even like he's hiding it well. He wants to put a team in London. He wants that team to be Jacksonville. He wants it to relocate. They're trying to do that, essentially. Then he's got the lawsuits with the concussions, and we discussed that. Then he's got all other just tiny little issues. They're going to have a new CBA soon, which is going to be an enjoyable lockout for everyone. He's then got to think about progressing the league forward, maybe new teams, taking teams back to LA. What is the main priority right now for you, Neil?
The main priority I see looking at it is if they can get through the lawsuit with the concussions, and they can, to borrow a phrase from a besmirched period of American history, if they can emerge from this with honour, but having lost, they have to pay out millions of dollars to these players whose lives have been ruined because of concussion and whatnot. But they come out with that almost with a smile on their face, saying, "Look, we're happy to acknowledge that they played the game, they made the game what it is today, they contributed to the Shield, and ultimately it's all about the Shield, the image of the Shield." His popularity with the people will go through the roof. They think, what a guy. He's helping all these people. Again, it might be the owners are looking and saying, "Well, that's our money. Their time has gone, but it's our money now." But as I say, if he does that, the other deals fall into place. The CBAs, the TV deals, because they know this fella. He's trying to please everyone, and he's going quite a long way towards it. So if the NFL becomes a product that people watch because they like the fella who's running it, the TV deals, you're going to be fighting it because all the major companies are going to want it. So you can basically get as much as you want from that. I would say that's the biggest one. The London franchise it's a bugbear for him because it's as you say, he wants to do it. The biggest obstacles, as we know, are you can kick off at 6 o'clock our time. That's your lot, because otherwise you never get away from the bloody game. You can't play till 2 o'clock in the morning. You've got no transport links, and you can't have a bevy either. Obviously, that's obviously more our problem than the Americans. But I would say personally the concussion lawsuit, because it's something he almost inherited, whereas the other things are things he wants to bring about himself. He's inherited this problem. If he can ever solve that, then pretty much he can do whatever he wants after that.
So myself and yourself, Mains, we're right on the driving the bandwagon of the Washington Presidents, which I came up with. You're right behind that now, right?
Yeah, I quite like it at the moment. It's definitely the leaders in the clubhouse and the new name.
Good. So what would please the American populace more? Say he moves a team to London, and he just says he's doing that, and then in the same meeting he's got to try and appease them because he knows that's not going to go down well on the face of it. Does he announce he's moving a team to LA as well, or a new team in LA, or does he announce they're changing the Redskins to the Presidents?
I think if he wants the move to LA will probably get more fanfare than the change of the Redskins name to Presidents, but that's only because I think that a lot of the populace in America don't see that as big an issue as some other people do. So I think that the move of let's get an LA franchise, let's get a team back in LA would have it would hit a wider scope of people.
I also think the president's name, I don't even use that name because I'm deeply offended by the term Redskins or anything. I use it because I think it's better. I feel like it's got more to do with Washington. And on that, which president would you use? I always think the Lincoln statue is the best, the one that's in the City Hall. But Obama's got a pretty cool face and would maybe look better on a decal of a helmet.
Well, put it this way, I'm not putting George W. Bush on it.
That would be
I think Obama's too closely linked to Chicago as well, isn't he?
That's probably true.
Yeah, true, yeah.
So, one final thing with the future of the NFL. It ties into the concussions, it ties into everything else. The kickoff, which I think he wants out the game and he doesn't know how to get out of the game. Because if you can remove that, you remove so many problems with concussions. The kickoff is essentially what we get, obviously, on every down. It's just momentum, just a tidal wave of two human beings smashing at each other. But they all meet in the middle of the field on a rugby drive. Usually it's a guy who's like 5'11", 190 wet through, getting chased by 260-pound guys. Are we eventually going to have the kickoff gone and we all just start from the 20? What do you reckon, Neil?
I think it's the quickest and easiest way to introduce a safety element into the game. Because as you say, an awful lot of injuries, they got rid of the three-man wedge, you can only have a two-man wedge. Ultimately, I mean, speaking as an Eagles fan, I'm pretty confident I've seen one kickoff return in 15 years for a touchdown.
Was that
I can live
Deshaun?
without it. It's not something I see every time the ball is end over end going into the end zone to our return man. I'm not thinking he's going to the house. I'm thinking he's getting to the 15-yard line if he's lucky. So if you can give me, we'll start from the 20-yard line. I'll take that. I'll take that in a hot minute.
I'm with Dutton on this. Washington absolutely stinks on special teams. I'm hoping that we still have hold of the ball when we return the kickoff. So let's just get rid of it quickly as possible.
That is the one job in the NFL I wouldn't do. I feel like I could do every other job. I would refuse to be the return man. It just seems like a stupid position to take. Like, who grows up wanting to be the return guy in the NFL? I understand the flashiness, but you return one in 15 years, you're just getting crushed all the time. Doesn't seem like much of a good way to have an advanced age. What about the salary cap then? Would we ever see a day where they remove the salary cap? They actually had sort of whispers about that in basketball, that players aren't happy with the state of a salary cap and stuff. Especially with the NFL's different to the NBA because the NBA has caps per player as well. So a certain player can only earn a certain amount, whereas the NFL, you can spend your whole salary cap on one player if you want, essentially. Will we ever get to a time where owners like Jerry Jones, who earn so much money, say, I'm not as competitive as I want to be, so I want to remove the salary cap?
Just what we need. Jerry spending more money and not winning.
It'd be epic, right?
Could you imagine him and Dan? Jesus. They'd just be frightening. It's just, I don't even want to think about giving Daniel Snyder unlimited resources to try and fix my team. I think it's that situation of Jerry and Dan, for example, would quite like to do it because it'd mean they would win. But most of the other owners like money too much, so I think it's in benefit for them to keep the salary cap. I don't think the NFL wants to get to a situation where some teams are never going to be good.
Yeah.
They like the idea of parity, and they don't want, say, for example, Jacksonville to never be good. Even if it means that the Monday Night Footballers always say the Giants against the Cowboys, and 40 million people watch it. Although it's that side of it's good, the fact that 4 people are watching Jacksonville does not help the product.
All right, guys, we almost have to go because Neil has to get off to the Ashes. And we probably won't do the picks today. We'll post them out because we're going on for a long time and it is getting late. I understand that. But is there anything else we want to discuss and debate in sorts of a long vision of the NFL, Neil?
Well, I was literally just thinking of an alternative to just starting every drive on the 20 from the kickoff. What you could do is have the punter stand on the 50-yard line and say to him, "Okay, you've got to punt the ball." So and where it stops, that's where their possession starts. You don't have any other players in the field, just the punter, because this is something else that I've spoken to Mainz about constantly. Why don't punters try and go for the corners, coffin corner, instead of trying and boot it out the back of the end zone? So you have a punter who can put it out of bounds at the 4 from the 50-yard line, obviously under no pressure, where someone who's just going to absolutely put his foot through it. Well, yeah, they're going to start from the 20, add a bit of skill, and make the punter a bit more relevant, rather than just someone they wheel out.
Can I grubber kick it? So could I grubber kick it along the floor and roll it to where I want it to go and perfect that skill? Okay. I'm getting on board with this a bit. I feel like grandstanding for the punter for several times a game would frustrate the hell out of me, though.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
But of course, the Philadelphia Eagles punter was named the NFC Special Teams Player of the Week.
Good for him, you know? That's Alex Henry, right?
No, it was Donnie Jones.
Donnie Jones, oh man. Good for him. Henry's the kicker, I think.
Henry the kicker, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Looks a bit like Mike Glennon.
Giraffe. Long-necked giraffe. God, he's a funny-looking fella. Mains, anything else you want to discuss?
Hey, nothing from me, no. I don't think I can get beyond Dutton talking about punters for 5 minutes.
Man, you should be here for Stephen, who does a breakdown of field goal kicks every week. It's a snooze fest, to say the least. Right, boys, it's been a pleasure. This has been fun. I enjoyed talking about deep conversations. So essentially, Wes Welker should retire. Roger Goodell's going to be Tony Blair. Yada yada. Listen back to it if you didn't hear it all. It's been a good one, boys. Any time for the pair of you. I swear to you. Of course, Mains, you'll be back next Wednesday when Stephen should return from IR designated to return with toothache. People, please send him. His Twitter handle's at StephenFTUK. I want to see all sorts of profanities on his timeline. Toothache, and he can't come and do a podcast. He couldn't even just grumble through. Embarrassed for the man. But Neil, thanks for joining us.
No problem, I enjoyed it.
Enjoy the Ashes, man.
Thank you very much.
Mains, it's been a pleasure.
As always, speak to you next week.
I'll speak to everyone on Thursday.